I quite often give interviews both on Ukrainian channels, podcasts, broadcasts, and on Russian-speaking ones in all other parts of the world. And naturally, quite often the question arises, why the heck do America and Ukraine matter? Either on one side they say, why are you helping so little? Or on the other, why are you helping at all? Let's try to figure out this issue and see whether it's time to close the checkbook and let the brotherly Slavic peoples sort out their problems themselves or not. Or do we really have something to lose besides our chains? Only a complete fool would think otherwise. It's not clear that the foreign policy of any state is influenced by its internal situation. We, the United States, have an urgent political task, and that task is to not let the opposition party win the majority of seats in the House of Representatives in November. The opposition party in our country is currently called the Democratic Party. Most of the projects that started pulling America out of the difficult economic and international political situation into which the country was driven by the governments of Biden, Obama, and so on. So most of these projects will at best be slowed down, and in the worst and most likely case, stopped. Why? Because the lower house of Congress is, as they say, the country's wallet. They have the ability to slow down or completely shut down projects, which for us means a return to the socialist way of running the state, that is, to plundering. One produces, others rob him. That's why everything happening today in the United States of America is happening from a certain angle, namely whether this will help the Republicans win the elections in November, hinder them, or be neutral. Naturally, priority is given to projects that will help, while actions that are neutral are pushed to the background. Of course, the administration tries not to do anything that could help the Democrats. So let's try to figure out what we should do about Ukraine. It might sound silly, like we're here and Ukraine is over there, but Ukraine keeps reaching out and Europe keeps asking America for help. So, what should we do with this situation, with this problem? We can ask ourselves three very simple questions. What's happening right now at the front and at the negotiating table to understand the status quo, what each side wants, and how realistic it is to achieve that? That's about the future. And finally, and actually, what will the United States gain and what will it lose if Ukraine, well, let's say loses? Yes, from the perspective of a voter in the United States of America, not from the perspective of a philosopher. The war has been going on for the fourth year now, and for the last year, even a year and a half, there have been no significant movements on the front. Each month, between 20,000 and 30,000 people are killed. The front, the rear, a certain amount of military equipment is being destroyed, and a certain amount of money is being spent. More and more families are losing their sons and fathers, and the country is losing people who could have helped restore normal life and the economy on both sides. In reality, at the negotiating table, the same issues are being hashed out, where neither side is willing to make any compromises. More precisely, I would even say no compromises at all, although from time to time such compromise solutions are announced. But the next day there is suddenly a correction. So I said it, but then I missed the mark, and it turns out I missed. By the way, this word mazal means happiness in Hebrew, but it has nothing to do with what I wanted to say. It turns out that it was just chatter, talk that had nothing to do with reality. And why, in fact, are neither side moving towards ending the war, towards the goal of ending the war? It seems like they're always saying they want to end the war, but they're not moving in that direction. The thing is, Russia has a very clear goal, namely to announce to the people that the objectives set for the army before the start of the special military operation have been achieved and even exceeded. Hooray, so we, Russians, suffered, endured hardships, but the result justified all the problems we had to go through. So that, well, and then there's a long list of problems that Russia supposedly solved in Ukraine. The Ukrainian side is, well, practically in the same situation, where they have to explain why they stopped the war now and not earlier. Well, let's say back in 2022, 23 days after it started, when about 1 million people have been killed or wounded, 10 million have left their homes and some of them have moved abroad. Yes, the government should explain, say something like, we saved the country from, Well, and then go on to explain what exactly they saved the country and the people of Ukraine from, and why. To enter negotiations, say, on the 23rd day after the war began would have been suicide, but now, supposedly, it's the right time. While any person understands that on the 23rd day it would have been the best way out of the situation that the leadership of both countries put their people in. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, I clearly understand, I know, and I have said many times that the one who attacked is Russia, and that's why I call them the instigators, bloody bandits, scoundrels. There is everything there, yes, but to put it mildly, maybe they are 70% to blame. But the Ukrainian leadership is also 30% to blame. Another point that the Ukrainians are trying to achieve in the negotiations is guarantees that those who led the country for these 4 years and before, in fact, will also not be prosecuted. That, as they say, they won't be hanged upside down or put on the rack by the rib. But they didn't prepare the country for war. They did nothing for that, because they absolutely and completely stole everything that hadn't already been stolen by previous oligarchs and administrations of Ukraine. By creating, during the war, a state led by a single gang, they did exactly what Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin did in Russia around 2002-2003. All the other oligarchs, red bandits, either fled, ended up in prison, went bankrupt, or were forced into a hierarchical structure where they acknowledged the supremacy of the gang that seized power. So it's absolutely the same situation in Moscow and Kiev, just with a delay of a little over 20 years. Moscow is more advanced because 20 years have passed since then, while Ukraine only started building this just recently, about 4 years ago. Just like in Russia, the media is under pressure. Some people fled, some died, and some stopped talking. In Russia, the children of the disobedient were thrown from the upper floors of tall buildings, and after being told that the same would happen to their other children, people fell silent. I know exactly how it happened. Not just by hearsay, but I don't know how it happened in Ukraine. But I strongly suspect that it happened in a similar way, maybe with some national twist or a bit differently due to local characteristics. Another serious issue is called security guarantees in the country, and everyone understands that Ukraine wants to get a guarantee that Russia won't go to war against it in a few years, and Russia wants to get a guarantee that NATO will stop and won't move even closer to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Such guarantees, let me repeat once again, no one is going to give to either side. And both Europe and America are going to sign papers that won't mean anything. So if a military situation arises again and the West is supposed to do something, then the West, having signed whatever papers, will order its blue, green, or brown helmets to act, to back off, and they won't do anything. No one will accept Ukraine into NATO, and there won't be any NATO-style guarantee like NATO. Well, also because Russia won't be satisfied with that, will it? So, if such a document is planned, they simply won't stop the military actions. Is there a way out? Yes, there is, but neither Russia nor Ukraine likes it. And for now, neither side has the incentive or motivation to do something they both dislike. Europe didn't let Ukraine end the war in 2022, and Europe isn't doing anything to make this war end sooner. If you don't believe me, then think about why Europe kept buying oil and gas from Russia all these years simply because it was cheaper for them. If it had cost, well, let's say the same, they might have switched to someone else maybe, but it cost a little more money. They would have said, damn, let's say Ukrainians are being killed with our money, but we won't pay more. Talks about how we are helping Ukraine as much as possible. You are helping too. Yes, it comes down to the fact that they just needed to buy oil and gas at a higher price, and Russia would have been left without money. That would have worked in 2022, maybe at the beginning of 2023, but before Russia reoriented itself toward China and India. So in other words, European talk is just talk and nothing more. What internal events exactly influence the actions of the United States of America? In November 2026, there will be congressional elections in the United States. The Trump administration absolutely does not want Ukraine to fall into Russia's hands before these elections. On the other hand, for the end of the war in Ukraine to be counted as a success for Trump, it is necessary for this war to end no later than the beginning of autumn. Then Trump will have enough time to position himself as the man who ended another European war and stopped hundreds of thousands of deaths, both to close the case before the next electoral cycle. The Trump administration is aiming for a deal that can be presented as a victory. There's nothing wrong with the word deal. We stopped the war without sending a single American soldier. Today in Europe, they're discussing not only the future of Donbas and Kherson, but also the future balance of power between Washington, Moscow, and Brussels. For Trump, this is a chance to show that he knows how to end other people's wars without turning them into American wars, like a bunch of other presidents did before him. So the Trump administration will push for Russia and Ukraine to stop killing each other in the near future. But if it becomes clear by the end of the summer that this won't happen anytime soon, judging by the mood among Republicans and the administration, all aid to Ukraine will stop immediately. Ukrainians need to clearly understand that America does not see their war as its own, will no longer finance it, and certainly will not promise to send its soldiers to resolve or stop the country that broke the agreement. Another factor is Europe's fatigue, and the division in the United States. Europe is tired of the expenses and fears that without the United States, it will have to cover the gap in Ukraine's defense budget with its own resources. They definitely have no intention of sending people. The discussion is about money, equipment. Well, mainly about money, since equipment is also money, right? Some European elites advocate for a softer agreement with Russia, just to reduce the risk of escalation and economic losses in Europe. The financial situation is very bad, and they are afraid of a public outcry if there isn't enough money for social needs. And at the same time, people will know that the funds went to the war against Russia on Ukrainian territory. Then they'll have the same reaction as Make America Great Again in America. If before Europeans saw Ukraine as a kind of guard, standing up for their common freedom and prosperity, if before they saw Russia as an incredibly strong opponent to be feared and were ready to hire Ukraine and pay with their own money, a barrier that Ukraine set up so that Russia wouldn't reach the border of the European Union. But now they have started to realize that Russia is not that strong, and Ukraine, with all its thievery and corruption, is neither a brother nor even a distant relative. Why should they worsen their standard of living by allowing some bandits to defend themselves from other bandits? The Europeans formed a coalition of the willing, in my opinion, for post-war support and a possible peacekeeping mission. But after creating this coalition, the first thing they rushed to the United States to ask for support and requested our country to be the key guarantor in case Russia breaks the truce. So once again, they cooked something up. But if something needs to be done, if time and resources need to be spent, if lives of soldiers are to be put at risk, it won't be them who have to do it, but someone else. In this case, it's the Americans. Why do the Americans need this? At the same time, most Americans don't want to see their troops or their planes involved in any operation on the territory of Ukraine or Russia in America. Support for military and economic aid to Ukraine remains, yes, but it's no longer total. A significant part of society is tired of endless tranches. Among Republicans, there are especially strong sentiments against long-term support, against patriotism in Tortunya. Sarakiv, the parade of Kuchai-Zelenka. And you can what? We discovered a mysterious French call caused by the previous administrations, including because we traveled all over the world, saving someone, helping someone, and now it turns out that we are the most terrible, the scariest, the worst. Why do we, Americans, need this? That's the logic of Make America Great Again. At the very least, it's a very powerful movement. Why do we even need this war at all? What does America see as its priorities? Well, first of all, it's the southern border, crime, inflation, and jobs. Any dollar sent to Kiev is seen as a dollar not invested in American life, in American cities, in American industry. From the voters' perspective, at least most of them, Ukraine is not a treaty ally, but a problematic partner who is being lobbied for by whom? And why is the Washington establishment doing this? And the defense corporations. A huge, I would say overwhelming part of working America believes that Europe is geographically closer to Russia, that together they make up a whole, a European whole. Europe's united economy is no smaller than the economy of the United States of America. There are 550 million of them, and if Europeans are so afraid of Putin, who has 140 million people in his country, let them fight on their own. What does it have to do with us? There are 550 million of them, plus another 40 million in Ukraine against 100. Well, how many 40 million Russians? Why are they coming to us? The sale of American weapons to Europeans is fine, then Europeans do whatever they want with them, including transferring them to Ukraine, and that doesn't raise any objections. Yes, we can produce it, we can give away what we don't need, we can do something else, maybe even make it to your order. Just give us a date, we'll produce it, and then you can pay us. The only thing no one understands is where Europe will get the money, because they're always saying they don't have enough funds to increase their contributions to NATO. If they have the money, why haven't they been spending on NATO for 30 years straight, and now they're saying, no, please protect us, we don't have the money. According to our agreement with them, they're supposed to contribute to NATO, but they aren't. And if they don't have the money, then how are they going to buy weapons from us? They're lying somewhere, MAGA. And in general, the Republicans are afraid that Ukraine is turning into a second Iraq. We absolutely don't need that. We'll end up in another long conflict without a clear exit strategy. Any talk about peacekeepers or possible strikes on Russia if they're attacked brings up associations with Iraq, with Afghanistan, and for many older people, even with Vietnam. MAGA says, we didn't vote for an endless war on foreign borders. If Europe wants to play geopolitics, let them pay for this game themselves. Our task is to make sure that American soldiers are never sent into the line of fire because of mistakes made by others in Kyiv and Brussels. And they consider it a mistake that for 30 or more years there was no preparation for possible military conflicts. But if you live like Lopuk, in the end you get exposed. In Brussels, just like in Kyiv, they were hoping that Uncle Sam would come to the rescue, and despite the fact that they are older, they ask for help, and they constantly express their contempt for us. This annoys everyone as well. Even though they don't really read in the Ural or Russian way, our television, newspapers, and the internet often reprint, show, and talk about it. But they want us, while saying all these nasty things about us, just such foolish uncles. They flew in, protected us, then patted us on the head, and then quickly ran back without asking for a single penny for their services. And if, God forbid, we say, guys, these things need to be paid for, then it turns out we are inhuman beasts, cold-hearted misers, I don't even know what else. In response to the proposal brought by Abatkov, well, everyone knows, so to speak, he brought Russia's proposal. Let's split up, let's take a month, let's make a truce now, let's do this, let's do that. So Russia said, let's do it differently. So that's how what is now called the Dmitriev package came about. Well, he physically, so to speak, brought it. So that's why it's called the Dmitriev package. This is the informal name for a major economic proposal from Russia to the Trump administration, to Trump and to Ukraine. We're talking about a multi-trillion, you heard that right? Around $12 trillion package for long-term American cooperation between the United States and Russia. Well, who is supposed to provide the money? I hope you understand, in exchange for the United States agreeing to certain conditions of a peace agreement on Ukraine. So yes, well, we'll come to an agreement on Ukraine, but let's set up cooperation worth $12 trillion. America, which is the world's leading and by far the most advanced producer. Just for your information, yes, only 4% of the world's population lives here in America. And for some reason, 26% of all the money circulating around the world comes to America. So we make up 4%, but we get paid 26%. China, with all their 1.5 to 1.7 billion people, gets 18% of the money that circulates around the world each year. So just do the math. That means the number 1 economy and the number 37 economy, I'm not sure exactly. Russia is 39, 38, 37, somewhere around there. Basically, it's close to the underdeveloped developing countries. Yes, they offer us joint work, but they won't do it for free. And basically, there are the main elements of the proposal. According to open sources, well, the text itself hasn't been published anywhere, and only some things have been leaked, some things have become known, some things have been discussed. That's basically the first point. Russia is returning to dollar settlements, including energy transactions, thus leaving its partners in the Global South and Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, mainly China, hanging out to dry. The second point is long-term contracts for the modernization of the Russian aircraft fleet with the participation of American companies and the possible localization of part of the production in Russia, meaning that we would organize production on Russian territory. So they were sure that Vasya wouldn't start drinking again on the very next day, right after something urgent needed to be done. The third point is joint oil and gas projects, including offshore and hard-to-recover reserves. As you understand, others aren't very good at doing this, but we do it very well, with compensation for previous losses for American companies. We will compensate you for what was taken from you before, but in return, you will help us in a modern way so that we have a lot of money again, because we are running out of easily extractable oil. Fourth, preferential conditions for the return of American business to the Russian market and special measures to protect investments. Well, until a new Putin comes and says, I'm canceling these measures. Fifth, cooperation in nuclear energy, high technologies, and especially in the field of artificial intelligence. And sixth, joint extraction of strategic materials like platinum and others from the Ukrainian side. This document is described as Moscow's attempt to buy more favorable political terms for itself regarding the war in exchange for what they call gigantic economic benefits for the United States and American business. Maybe I just don't really see it, so let me try to put it in plain language. We, Russia, are ready to throw all our Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa partners, all those in the Global South leaving the dollar zone, under the bus. Take your pick. If you build the industry of tomorrow for us, since we embezzled, then embezzled again, and then embezzled once more. And now we want you to build it for us because we attacked Ukraine and we agree not to kill Ukrainians. Now we want you to build us a future and let us attack whoever we want again. Honestly, it's hard for me to assess the pros and cons for the United States from this proposal, but similar proposals were already made by the Soviet Union at one time, for example, to Stalin. America built what is called the industrialization of the Soviet Union, and then, during the war with Hitler, provided for the needs of the front and, to a large extent, the needs of the Soviet Union's rear. And already in the Yeltsin era, Russia was receiving food aid. You remember Bush's chicken legs and many other things. Finances in huge amounts, about 20 to 30 billion. I can't recall exactly. T3. There were huge loans from us and from the world. We guaranteed World Bank loans, and also provided a lot of technological assistance to help modernize Russia's industry. So I won't comment on that because, first of all, I haven't read it. It's all rumors. Secondly, maybe I don't fully understand everything, so let's not comment on it. I just said it, that's all. Let's try to draw some conclusions from everything I've said, so to speak. I would even say there are two specific conclusions. First, why does America need Ukraine at all? And second, isn't it time to close the checkbook and let the brotherly Slavic peoples sort out their own problems? So not two conclusions, but rather two answers to questions. That's what the conclusions from what we've discussed are. Now, about the first point, unfortunately, what I'm about to say will be painful for Ukraine. From any point of view, America does not need Ukraine at all. America's goal is to contain China by separating Russia, probably from China and the Global South, as well as to deal with its own problems and establish neutrality, a neutral zone around its borders. Ukraine does not play any role anywhere in solving these problems. The only question is, why does the current administration and, well, I don't know, those voters who rallied around Trump need Ukraine? That is probably if by the end, well, let's say by the summer or early autumn of 2026, we can say that we have stopped the bloodshed. If that doesn't happen, then I'll repeat once again that America doesn't need Ukraine for anything at all. The idea of stopping Russia is in no way an American goal or an American problem at this point. Maybe it was yesterday, maybe it will be again the day after tomorrow, maybe, but today it is not. If the problem between Russia and Ukraine is not resolved by, as I have said many times today, by the end of summer or the beginning of autumn of this current year, 2026, then it will last at least another year and a half. The United States of America will withdraw from this issue, leave the region, and focus on completely different matters. Maybe in a year and a half. Why do I say at least a year and a half? Because maybe in a year and a half, a new potential cycle begins, an election cycle, yes, an electoral cycle. And if the next potential president from the Republican Party tries to persuade Trump to help Ukraine in some way, then maybe after a year and a half without American assistance, something will start to happen. Can Ukraine last another year and a half? And that's considering, first of all, there's no guarantee that Trump will act any differently, even just to satisfy the request of his potential successor. And besides, no one guarantees that the successor will think that Ukraine needs to be helped. So I would say, if you don't solve your problems, well, by November, yes, in my opinion, you need to do it in 2 or 3 months. Yes, that means you are left one-on-one with Russia for a year and a half. And then maybe, in addition, maybe there will be some help from the United States, maybe, or maybe nothing at all. Well, maybe something will change in January of 2029. Well, that's still a long way off. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, maybe it will, maybe it won't. I'm just afraid that by that time, there won't be a war anymore. Why am I telling all this, even though I've already expressed similar thoughts several times in interviews and in my speeches? I really want this to reach Ukrainians because no matter how much I talk to them, in the end they still say, well, how long do we have to endure until help comes back to us again? As long as they have hope that someone will come and bring them something magical that will help them get free from the Russians, as long as this hope lingers, they will keep losing their sons. Approximately 20 to 25,000 every month. Look, here's a calculation. And that's why people say about us Americans that we're materialistic and only think about numbers. On average, 25,000 people die every month in Ukraine from today. In the best case, it will take 2 years before the situation might change, or it might not change. 20 there. 25,000 multiplied by 24 months. Gentlemen, that's from 600 to 700,000 people who have died. Add to that just as many wounded, shell-shocked, and probably just as many with psychological trauma. And now add, or better yet, subtract the number of power plants, factories, and institutions that will be destroyed. Yes, you will have joyful moments from time to time. Something will also explode in Russia. In Russia, 20, 30, 50, or 200 people will also be killed. There will be great joy. A ship will also sink in Russia. You can even joke in front of the television cameras that you will only negotiate with Russia after they have a re-election. If all of this turns around, it outweighs 600,000 dead, then go ahead. Then do what you think is necessary, and in fact, you are already doing what you think is necessary, that's all. I would be glad if I could be more optimistic, but I feel like I'm doing quite important work. I'm trying to sober up the overconfident ones and also take away the hope. Take away the hope of those who keep hoping and dragging things out while guys and girls are dying at the front. Goodbye until we meet again.